Coincidentally, I actually have a real-world example using variogram. So that's what I trying to present. Scale matters in coupled natural human system modeling. And in the last several years, I've been working on a project funded by NSF, CNH, coupled natural human system, to look at the Mississippi River Delta sustainability problem. So I guess we all talk about that scale matters. But the main thing is that how do we know we are using the right scale, right data scale, identify the right process, and then making the right decisions. So I guess this workshop is trying to find what are the good practical guides or principles to follow. We talk about what are the meanings of scale and the definition of scale. Some years ago, it's 1992, I have worked with a collaborator to look at the 4 meanings of scale. And then, of course, when we look at the scale, of course, you can look at it either spatial or temporal or spatial-temporal. And I think these 4 terms have been already described in different ways by previous presenters. Measurement scale, meaning the resolutions. Operational scale, which is like context, process, or neighborhood scale. And then the geographical extent, observational scale, and then cartographic scale. So we try to sort of summarize the meanings at that time. And I think I can skip this. We all know that the resolution's effects in biophysical domain, and many people have studied that the biophysical relationship changes with resolution, which is the measurement scale. And I did for some time looking at the resolution effects in environmental health domain. And I'm just pick one slide. And obviously, when someone mentioned that it's not because of the aggregation problem, but it is. Because if you look at the hypothetical example above, these are the disease occurrence. And if you look at the individual occurrence, you see the cluster. But if you are in the aggregate form, they are all even, because every grid has 3 points. So long ago, I studied, this is China, and when we map using the county level versus the provincial level, you really missed out a lot of information. So try to repeat. Another study that I've done some years ago is that this is an example using example of health risk assessment surrounding a Superfund hazardous waste site, which is here. And the thing is that in the environmental health risk assessment domain, they always look at draw a 1-mile boundary and then try to tabulate how many cancer incidents in the boundary and then compare with the national or some regional standard. And obviously from this study, if we draw a 1-mile boundary, it's really, really very significant, but then not 2 miles or not any other mile, or not 0.5 mile. So when we have this result, this is a project with our state health officials, and usually when you have to study, you have to talk with the people. But then when they look at the uncertainty, no, we don't want you to talk to the people. Maybe want to wait for 5 more years to get more data to be more certain. So, so what I'm saying is that when we talk about analysis with real data, there are always some consequence and like something that related to the decision making. And some years ago also we tried to look at maybe probably using the fractals to look at, to review the scaling properties of different phenomena. And this is a typical famous fractal plot. One side, the x is the divider length, and then the y is the total length in a logarithmic form. And many researchers like Mike have done a lot of things about the fractals and saying that within this range, it looks log linear, and this is the range of this is the range that you can be used as a tool to understand what is the range of resolution that you should use, and then beyond those range, then the pattern will look different. I have some other example, but I don't have it because of time limit. So back to two most recent case study that I have worked on. One is just like trying to look at the effects of landscape fragmentation on land loss, and then the other one is looking at land loss predictions that we try to use the variogram to improve our the accuracy of the model. So for those of you who do not know where Mississippi River is, so I'm just showing it here. And this is Mississippi River, and I'm New Orleans, and I'm right here. And that's just, just very brief context. We, like many deltaic regions, somewhat sinking, and because of sea level rise. So if you see this is in 1932, this is looking at from the Gulf of Mexico to the north. And there's a lot of land in 1932, okay, all right. So 2000 and 2050. So people always talk about that, every hour you lose a football stadium of land. And down in Louisiana, football is the one that you make relation to. So, and of course, this is the land with hurricanes. So it is also a land that has a lot of energy infrastructure, and what land loss also impacting people, because people, you lose the land, and then there's no, it's very hard to have other economic activities and so on and so forth. But then people may not want to leave because of cultural and all other things. So just want to show just some example down there. Okay, so we have a project, actually six or 7 years ago, it's finished. And we look at the region as a coupled natural human system. And if you have an imaginary line, the north-south boundary between this is New Orleans, and then and this is Lake Pontchartrain. So we found that region in the south have continuously losing people and also losing land, and on the north people increasing, and there's relatively no land loss problem. So we launched a project to try to model what are the linkage, and hopefully when we find out the model to develop a linkage, and we can develop scenario and then do the projections and simulation in the future. So I just want to show the diagram here. This is something that whenever we draw some diagram, make sure you have double arrow, because that's the feedback mechanism that everybody is looking for. So back to the first case study. We look at the land loss problem, and down in Louisiana deep south, that we have lots of researchers looking at land loss and land loss, but very few people, and even there's basically nobody look at the spatial fragmentation. So I look at the fragmentation. I try to look at the fragmentations. I'm going to skip a little bit here. The research question that I have is, what is the effect of landscape fragmentation on land loss in the Mississippi River Delta? And the hypothesis is simple hypothesis. The higher the degree of landscape fragmentation, the greater the land loss. So, but here comes the issue is that how to measure landscape fragmentations. For this study, I used the software ICAMS that and a number of people developed, and it has module on calculating fractal dimension and Moran psi and other indices. So we utilize the triangular prism method within the fractal group of method, and basically I'm going to skip the method itself, but I just want to bring that, for example, in this case, the dimension range from 2.0 to 3.0. The higher the D, the more fragmented the surface, right? So, and we also use another index called spatial autocorrelation Moran's-I, and so that's the Moran's-I equation, and some previous article shows that the Moran's-I range from -1 to +1. The higher the I, the less fermented. So we utilize these two spatial indices to indicate fermentations. So of course, we need to go get data and then calculate the fermentation and then compute land loss and then just do a simple linear regression. So the very first thing that we have faced is that what box size should be used to compute the fermentation index. Because when we calculate fractal, it's not just one pixel. You have to have a neighborhood to calculate it. And then the other issue, which is not quite related to scale, but how to isolate the effect of fermentation. So, so we use the data, the study region here, with the land set data, and of course we try to group that one. The part is land, and the other part with water. And then we recode the map, and then we start with the 101 by 101 box size. And the reason why we chose that is that all these coastal oceanographers or whatever, when they try to look at the coastline change in Louisiana, they all start with 101 by 101. I don't know why, so we started 101 by 101. Okay, and it just turned out that, really after testing 101 by 101 is not significant, but the rest are significant. So, anyway, so we start that, and I think I can just skip a little bit here because this is just to make sure our sample is stick with the 50% land-water ratio, and Yi has helped in trying to derive that land-water ratio. So we extract pixel with 50% ratio, so we compare with the same sample. Every sample has 50% land and water. The only difference is the spatial arrangement, the fermentations. So this is like 101, for example, all this where the samples are, and we compute the land loss, and we do the linear regressions. These are just some results to show the most and the least fragmented samples with a box size of 101 by 101. And when you look at it, obviously you can see that this fragmented area has has more land loss, the red cells, the red color. And this is just another example of the least fragmented and the most fragmented for 51 by 51 box size. So the result shows that if you use 101, R square is 0.009. I mean, you cannot find anything lower than that. But when you look at it, the other has a higher. So I plot it in the curve like that. So if you use 101, following the traditional way of doing and looking at the coastline retreat, there is no relationship between landscape fragmentation and the land loss. But the highest one is 51 by 51. But then it's not always linear. So that's the problem. Is we don't know where's the peak. So anyway, so that's the result that I just summarized. There's no relationship at 101 by 101, but in other box size. So I try to preach to the people that down there the scale matters, and fermentation effect is best detected at this scale. And in fact, from a spatial point of view, that fermentation alone can really explain as much as 45% of land loss in the next time period. So I have another study. Following this, I wanted to expand it further to look at land loss prediction, not just by fermentation, but by other things, incorporating more. And so the reason why I want to do that is, so in this case, I wanted to see whether, because when we do a regression model, unless we do GWR, or we always just look at the data at one point, and then do the regression with other, with other variable. So in this case, I wanted to look at not the data at one point, but rather what is the neighborhood effect that affecting this point. So I used the variogram to try to detect the appropriate neighborhood size, and in this case, it's related to the context scale or the operational scale. So, we published a paper without doing this one-scale analysis. And the idea is that we wanted to look at, again, the land loss, how does it affect population loss? And the land loss, of course, is affected by many variables. And then the land loss affect population, and population affected by many variables, and then population go back and affect the land loss. So it's a set of equations governed by that. Don't worry about the equation. That's the one scale, but it did publish. So and eventually we published it using just one scale, and this is just want to say how the different variables are related. So now I wanted to see how. Okay, this is just another diagram to show that, but I want to see how by incorporating the variogram effect, how does it affect the modeling itself? Because it's very important that we try to develop a model as accurate as possible so that we can project, if future sea level rise and climate change and all this effect. So we use the same data that we have, a bunch of variable, elevation, subsidence rate, physical variable, and human variable. And totally, we have 8 environmental variable, 22 human variable. And so we convert all these variables from different scale into like 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. That's, again, it's very arbitrary, but we have to start somewhere. And then we try to see whether we can detect the appropriate neighborhood size using the variogram analysis. And then we wanted to conduct regression and compare the two models. So it's very simple thinking. So these are the chunk of data that we have: elevations, subsidence rate, pipeline, and all this, the chunk of data that we have. And we just use a very conventional spatial interpolation method by using some a little bit aerial interpolation using some existing data so that we can put it all into 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer data. And then we wanted to incorporate the neighborhood effects. So the simple tool here is variogram analysis. Okay, so we look at almost for every single variable, how does the variogram look like? And again, if you look like something like this, then we can use this range as the neighborhood distance to be incorporated into the model. So that's another this is comparison with two different variables. One has a very distinct range, and this one is no neighborhood effect. Okay, it's just no distinct range, and we use the stepwise logistic regression model to try to see to look at how land loss were affected by the chunk of variable. So from the variogram analysis, we identified 12 variables detected with neighborhood effects. Okay, and they all have the distance range. And it's again, very simple. The model one, when you have no neighborhood variable, we find out from the stepwise regressions is 15 out of 30 variables selected, 8 natural and 7 human variables. But if you have model 2, when you incorporate with neighborhood variables, you have 8 natural, 8 human, plus 9 out of the 12 neighborhood variables selected. So you have more variables. And regression result seems model 1 without neighborhood effect, 44.74%. And then model 2 has pretty sick increase, 56%. So I think I show this study is that variables have different neighborhood size, and also variables come in different form. So it's very difficult to see in an empirical testing modeling. We need a better way, to try to detect the scale effect. And I wanted to show one thing is that I don't know whether you know of, long ago in the UCGIS has a initiative to look at the research agenda, and scale was a research agenda in 2005. So, and at the end of the chapter, I work with a number of colleagues to look at the research agenda. And you can take a look at this, and it's probably half-baked, or it's probably not relevant, but really even the first line is so relevant for today's talk. Develop more consistent definitions of scale and its associated attributes across multiple disciplines. And then the second one, maybe develop a scale analysis module to be included in major environmental or analytical measurement method. There are 10 of them, so I'm going to just go through very quickly. And so the third one is also like, that's why I'm interested in asking people, how did they do the scale analysis? And obviously, we have to be very careful that when we try to do a multi-scale analysis, some study just maybe aggregate some cells, into a larger cell and then do the analysis. The thing is that are the scale effects really scale effects or the resampling method? And another potential project is that maybe we need to identify more work on identifying, developing, and then comparing techniques. The variogram, and obviously the multi-scale GWR would be something that could be used. The thing is that the subtitle here is that if you have some sort of technique that can be used to identify the scale effect, could we include that as part of your metadata? In other words, your metadata can be a minimum, maximum value, mean, standard deviation, variance. Do we have a scale effect or scale? I don't know what it is. Scale variability to be included. And then number 5, identify the range of scale over which an attribute classification scheme is valid. And I think this is more related to maybe the remote sensing images and obviously if you have 30-meter pixel, you should be able to identify some sort of the difference between different length cover as opposed to a 1 kilometer remote sensing images. Then another potential project, identify the optimum scales of analysis for common data set and critical scales at which the content or structure change. Can we use fractals to look at the linearity, or can we use variogram or any other thing that can show the abrupt change of scale? And this is probably the last line. And develop methods for cost benefit. Well, cost in this case is data resolution. I mean, you can get individual point. The benefit may be more accurate, but it's not necessarily true though. So something that you cannot analyze by looking at individual point. So the number 8, improve methods for data generalization, and that's another issue regarding to cartographic generalization. The thing is that here we want to mention that it's not just the line that you generalize it, but a landscape, the model generalization. So the last one is improve methods for incorporating knowledge about scale. Well, that's kind of the same as the previous one. And then can we have some sort of multi-scale database structure or a software product. So I think that's all I have, the real scale. Yeah. Yeah. Questions? That was 2005. Now it's 2020. We need to think about it. Yeah.
Well, you can find papers on scale 100 years ago, but
yeah.
I just like to make a comment. It's very interesting to see that you investigate the effects of landscape fragmentation and land loss. The ecology, what we usually do is to consider fragmentation as a result of land loss. Mm-hmm. So actually, that's interesting to look at the same phenomena from the other.
Right, right. So we look at the pattern. We don't know the process is leading to it or causing it. So I think yes, that's the main thing. Yeah.
Whenever you have fragmentation, you have loss first.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if you look at it in a dynamic way, the next time period, the more fragmentation, the more loss. Right. So it's not just land loss lead to fragmentation, but also fragmentation lead to more land loss in the next time period, right? Anyway, okay, yes.
Yeah, I remember you think highlight a little bit. You have a paper really interesting from my perspective. You use the fractal dimension to estimate the coastlines have the same erosion process.
Right, right.
Along the Louisiana coast. But have you done the similar things to look at the fractal dimension of the fragmentation, identify zones have the same land loss processes, and then based on that zoning to estimate the different rates of land loss? That's
a good suggestion. Yeah, I have not. I just look at it as a whole, but not like not in a subdivision. Looking at the But that's another way to look at it. Yeah.